Thank you. A big thanks to Ina, obviously, for organizing everything, and Damine. We're very happy to be here. So this talk is going to be, is German guilt responsible for the oppression of Palestinians? This will be fully in English, so I apologize in advance to those who don't like that. This talk will be held by Phil, right next to me, Phil Butland. He is a socialist from Bradford, Northern England, and he founded the Berlin Link Internationals and is currently active with the Left Berlin and Socialismus von Unten. Alongside his political activities, Phil is also the curator of the Cinephile Berliner film blog. So thank you very much for joining, and I'll give the microphone to Phil.
Thanks, Jitske. I'm trying not to speak too long, because I want as much time as possible for discussion, because this is something for us to talk about. The talk I'm going to give is roughly based on an article I wrote for theleftberlin.com, so if people want to engage with things that I don't have time to talk about, please read that and please send feedback and criticism. To start with, I just want to say what I'm not going to talk about as well. I'm not going to talk about why the German state supports Israel. I think this has nothing to do with guilt either. It's everything to do with geopolitics in the oil region. But I don't have time to talk about everything. I'm planning writing an article on that in the future. What I want to talk about is the strange phenomenon that most people who are non-German, who now live in Germany, experience, where we've got a huge contradiction in society. If you look at the polls about Israel's war on Gaza, 70% now, 80% of Germans oppose Israel's war in Gaza. That's comparable with countries pretty much throughout the world. It's no more, no less. And yet, if you look at the size of demonstrations, or if you just talk with people at work, or just talk with friends, there is obviously something different happening in Germany. There's obviously many more people saying, "Oh, it's just too complicated. Well, there's problems on both sides. I can't really make a stance. I don't like what Israel is doing in Gaza, but Hamas." A number of times you come to discussion somewhere, but Hamas is something which feels like it's specific in Germany, and I want to look into this. One of the reasons, or the main reason which is usually done, is German guilt. Now, I don't think that guilt plays no role, but I want to argue that guilt is an insufficient explanation for what's going on. But before I do that, just something to explain what the guilt argument is about. It's anecdote told by a friend Momo. Momo was talking to a German friend of his. His friend said one day his daughter came from school, I think his daughter's about 12%, came home and said, "Daddy, are we to blame for the Holocaust?" And we're in a situation here where being taught in German schools, being pushed in the German media is the idea not even that all Germans were to blame for the Holocaust. Now, in the 1930s and 40s, many Germans actively opposed the Nazis, and a lot more felt unable to do anything about it. So the idea that there is a German gene which makes you a Nazi was never true. But the idea that a 12-year-old girl, 80 years after the event, is to blame for what happened then, is something which is very much pushed by the media. But that of its own doesn't explain what any of this has got to do with Palestine. And I want to argue that in order for let's call them the German media and the German ruling class to be able to manufacture consent for their position on Israel, they go through three sleights of hand which build on this. The first sleight of hand is to reduce the crimes of the Nazis to anti-Semitism. There may well be people in the room in bad faith. There may well be people who will listen to that, quote that, and then say, the industrial genocide of Jewish people by Germany in the 1930s and 1940s is probably the biggest crime in history, if only because of the scale and the industrial level being going on. But the Nazis are responsible for a lot more other crimes as well. That before they could get to exterminating Jews, They had to crush all opposition, which means the first people in concentration camps were trade unionists, were communists, were even social democrats, people like Olaf Scholz, who had to be exterminated, who had to be got rid of before the extermination of the Jews could come in. There's also the attacks on Roma and Sinti, the attacks on disabled people, the attacks on LGBT people, anybody who didn't fit the idea of an Ubermensch. This meant that the Nazi crimes were about much more than pure anti-Semitism. But if you look at what German memory culture talks about, if you look at the way in which Germans talk about, here is how we atone for the Holocaust, there is a fixation on anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism alone. Now let's look at the other crimes of the Nazis and how they've been dealt with. You'd have thought, the first people who went forward were the communists, that the best way to atone for the Nazi crimes was to become a communist. And yet, within 11 years of the foundation of West German states, the Communist Party was banned. If you want to look at Roma and Sinti, who suffered dreadfully under the Nazis, there is one memorial to Roma and Sinti in Berlin, the Roma and Sinti victims of the Nazis. That is about to be torn down to make way for an S-Bahn. The situation with gays and lesbians is slightly more complicated because pink-washing Israel is one way in which the German state uses to justify its support of Israel. But the idea that Germany is a safe place for gays and lesbians is simply a myth. And so all of the various victims of the Nazis are quite allowed to drop by the wayside to suffer discrimination by the state. And yet there is this fixation that the only victims of the Nazis were Jewish. Okay, this is one slide. I just want you to keep this in your head while I go on to the next two things. The second thing is equating Jewish people with the state of Israel. Ina said, we have 2 more weeks of Oyoun. Oyoun is one of several places which have closed down, which have had their funding cut because of, quote, anti-Semitism. What did Oyoun do to get its funding cut? It hosted an event by the Jüdische Stimme, the Jewish voice of peace. Because the idea is not just we're against anti-Semitism, is that anti-Semitism is entirely equated with support for Israel, which means large Jewish groups could also be attacked with anti-Semitism. What we see with the new anti-Semitism law, it's not a law. If it's a law, it could be legally challenged and therefore defeated. What the anti-Semitism resolution, which has been brought in, it is being brought in to attack not people who are anti-Semitic as such, but people who are against Israel. If you, the chief of Berlin police recently had a statement to say the main victims, or some of the main victims of anti-Semitism in Germany is police. Just make of that what you can. But also we see with the anti-Semitism resolution, we have the AfD congratulating the Greens for finally understanding what the AfD has been saying all along. Okay, so we have this idea that anti-Semitism and criticism of Israel at the same time. At the same time, that for a lot of Jews, they are turning away from Israel. There was a survey of US Jews, I'm going to look at the notes here because they get the figures right. The survey of US Jews taken at the end of the last Trump administration. That means before 7th of October, before the bombing of Gaza, at a time when there was reactionary leadership in the US. Over half of the US Jews had never visited Israel. 41% felt not to or not at all connected to Israel. Over 50% of people younger than 30 didn't feel connected to Israel. And we saw this in the protests at the beginning of the year for Palestine, the Camps of Gaza, where the Middle East Eye reports that at several of the encampments, anti-Zionist Jewish students vastly outnumbered Palestinian or Arab student protesters. So here we are. So Point number one, the Holocaust is just about Jews. Point number two, anti-Semitism is just about Israel, although an increasing number of Jews don't even support Israel. That's right. So here we come to the third sleight of hand, which is the idea of imported anti-Semitism. This is something which, if you're fairly new here, you'll think, oh, this has been in discussion all the time. No, it was really brought in 2008 by Angela Merkel. Now, some people remember Merkel as being the nice, cuddly Liberal Chancellor who let in all the Syrian refugees. Well, at the same time as she was letting in refugees in 2018, she made a speech where she said, we have refugees now, for example, or people of Arab origin who bring a different type of anti-Semitism in the country. She had a number of anti-Semitism SARS, almost all of them brought up as Christians. One of them, Felix Klein, raised the issue of imported anti-Semitism at a similar sort of time. And so this is an attempt, particularly by the German government, to say, oh, well, Germany might have had a slight problem with anti-Semitism in the past, but we've dealt with that now. We're not the anti-Semites anymore. The anti-Semites are the Arabs and the Muslims, and particularly the Palestinians. Now, what that does to just a couple more statistics before I do this. There was a report in Al Jazeera in 2021. You'd have thought if the big problem of anti-Semitism was from Arabs, then the police statistics, the police are no friends of Arabs. They would be recording this. There was a report in 2021 of German police records published in Al Jazeera. There were, in 2020, 2,351 anti-Semitic incidents. Of these, 2,224, 95% were carried out by right-wing extremists. This is according to the police figures. Police figures and not to those of Muslims or Arabs or Palestinians. But what this means is the idea that it's not the Nazis who are responsible for anti-Semitism, it's not the AfD, it's not the people who shot up synagogues in Halle, it's the Muslims. This turns the argument of German guilt on its head. The initial justification was, we've got to support Israel because there is this latent anti-Semitism in Germans, which means that we particularly have got to be careful. I've lost count of the number of people telling me, oh, well, Germans are particularly sensitive about the crimes of the Nazis. Germans are particularly anti-Nazi. I say, hey, I'm pretty anti-Nazi myself. Yeah, I pretty much know what the Nazis did myself. Don't claim that you're the only ones who are able to fight the Nazis. But from going that because of latent German anti-Semitism, Germans must do something, they flipped over into there isn't any anti-Semitism in Germany at all. The synagogue shootings was done by somebody else. The real problem lies with Palestinians and with Arabs. And these points come together, come in with what was saying originally about the German guilt. Now, it is perfectly understandable that a lot of Germans have a real worry of what their grandparents might have done. A lot of people have a real worry of what was done in their name in the last 100 years. It does lead you to not really want to discuss history as much as perhaps you can. But once you have this feeling, oh, we can't talk about these things, it's uncomfortable to talk about these things, which is a genuine feeling that a number of people have. You then have these three sleights of hand. You have the idea that the Holocaust was only about the Jews, anti-Semitism is only about Israel, and anti-Semitism is something which is no longer German, it's something, it's Arab. Then this feeds the idea it's too complicated, or Germans can't talk about Palestine. This is an issue I've been in Germany nearly 30 years, and it was always astounding to me where German people were very, very happy to listen to me talk about Palestine, but said, oh, of course we can't do it ourselves. What that meant is something like the 7th of October 2023 happened, and the German left was not able to answer the complicated questions which came up at that. They were in the individual German left, individual organisations were, but as a whole, the German left was just not in a position where it could answer these complicated questions, where it could explain what had been going on, which meant that other more reactionary forces were able to provide apparent answers. And I think this is much more the reason for the German exception, much more the reason for why things are different here than any amount of talk of the anti-Deutsche. To be honest, the anti-Deutsche never had much power outside a few campuses and a few academic institutions. The much bigger problem was the internalising of Germans who would consider themselves anti-racist, would consider themselves against oppression, but have developed a blind spot about Palestine for the reasons I've tried to explain. Okay, that's all the bad news. I want to finish on some good news. Talk about there has been change in the last year. It's not been a massive change. It's not been enough. It's not been. That's just about perfect. It's not shown itself in huge demonstrations. But for example, German universities, which used to be the high point of pro-Israel sentiment in Germany, just about every single German university this year has seen an action about Palestine, for Palestine. This is pretty much unprecedented. We've seen groups of social workers, we've seen groups of health workers, we've seen artists all getting together to organise Palestine solidarity. The sheer scale of what Israel is doing, that even the International Court of Justice is having to react to this, but it means that people are, at the very least open questions, that the old ideas just don't fit, and people are at least open to other explanations which we could give. The old uncertainties remain too. All the things that have been in people's heads for decades about what you can say, what you can't say, what's anti-Semitic, what's not anti-Semitic. But we have a better chance than ever of people who are already pro-Palestine to actually carrying an argument and building a movement that, to be honest, we need. That we cannot have a successful pro-Palestine movement in Germany without the participation of at least some white Germans. The share of numbers. We need, however, to meet people where they are, and I think it's a great initiative from the Gaza Committee in Berlin, but also a whole number of NGOs, that there is a petition against Germans selling weapons to Israel, because you can go to people on the street, not just people you know, not just people in your Palestine bubble, but people that you meet, people that you know at work, or so you can set up a store in town and say, okay, you might have problems about but Hamas. You might say, oh, but Israel has the right to defend itself. Do you want your tax money to go to fund the bombs which are being dropped on schools, on hospitals, or the bullets which are being used to shoot UN aid workers? And I think it doesn't sound very sexy, this sort of campaign. I'd much prefer to have a demonstration of 1 million people tearing down Parliament. But if we are going to get to that stage, if we're going to get towards turning on Parliament, we need to pick people up and bring them with us. And I think the Gaza Committee has got a stall downstairs which has got the petitions. This is not just something for you to sign. It's something for you to take around all your friends, all your work colleagues, but also to help on the stalls that the Gaza Committee is organising, so that we can actually take this discussion to normal white Germans and actually start to win the discussion, start to shift the parameters of what's happening in Germany. I think the last thing to say, and then time is in, the guilt that may be there is more a perceived guilt. It's what people think. It is something which is open to be challenged. And the sheer level of what is happening in Gaza at the moment means that people are open to that challenge, but only if we take it to them. And I think one of the things that I hope we can repeatedly talk about at this conference is how we can actually take the people who are here, but really go out to the people who wouldn't come here, and to win the discussion with them as well.
All right, thank thank you very much. So we'll now take any questions or comments from the audience. If anyone has anything they want to mention or ask about, you can just raise your hand. Yes.
And please don't just ask, please say what you think as well.
Can you, whoever's going to talk, may come up because the cord is not cordless, or the mic is not cordless.
Okay, hi. Thank you for the great talk. I'm from Eastern Germany, which is usually not a good example of anything, but I wanted to just give a little talking point about something that I recently read, that there was a time when there was a German state that was supporting the liberation of Palestine, was supporting the PLO, and which basically said that never again, the German guilt means never again genocide, never again fascism. So it's probably not. I just want to remind people that it is possible for German people to have a different mindset on this. So the GDR, really don't want to glorify the GDR, but in this terms, the GDR had some, very positive aspects that maybe we can remind the people of. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? I think that was a great comment. Thank you very much. Yes, right there.
I'll bring this mic over.
Yeah. Sorry, this one is not functioning that well, so that will come.
We need to get this open.
There we go.
Alright, well I think, just you sort of like look at the world and it's quite like what these curfews. It's not sort of as you were saying, you're the far right, that's promoting all of this racism in the world. It's not like the fascists and like Nazis and stuff. It's like, it's the anti-war activists, it's the anti-genocide activists. And what of the quite rampant Islamophobia in society today? Well, that's kind of quite stuck under the rug. You sort of look at these arguments of like German guilt and all of that, and it's it's a scam, but you see who it comes from, and it comes from like the ruling class, it comes from like the politicians who want to rule the system, or it comes from like the media billionaires, and so it's these are the people that want to run capitalism, and as we all know, you can't have capitalism without racism. And so I think, of course, you're going to see these arguments perpetuated by people such as this, and that's why I think it's important that there's all of this like grassroots movement in support of Palestine, like anti-racist struggles and stuff, and that's why I think it's also important to look beyond like the, capitalist GDR, and to actually be like revolutionary socialists. I think fighting for Palestine, actually, it's like imperative that people fight against like the whole system that causes like all of this oppression in the world as well.
See one back there. Thank you very much.
Also, if anyone is going to talk beside it, or else you're going to be filmed. So.
Unless you want to be filmed.
If you want to ask a question, you can also maybe just pass it on. If you don't want to sit in person, maybe pass it on to you, and then you can.
I just wanted to add something. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir for a lot of us here, but I think the other aspect of this, the bitter irony, is the way that also anti-Zionist Jews are especially targeted and attacked and brutalized. In addition to Arabs and Palestinians, if you go to demos, it's very often anti-Zionist Jews that are being attacked by the police. We all know about the Palestine Congress when Jewish Voice for Peace's bank account was frozen and all the names were taken by the German state. And I read this article that I always come back to from the Jewish Currents called Bad Memory. And in it, the anti-Semitism czar, which is always a white German Christian, said, I'll always remember this line, that these Jews don't understand what anti-Semitism means for us Germans. These Jews don't understand anti-Semitism at all. And I think this is a very important point of this question, is the way that Jewish people are also suffering because of Germans' best this attitude around what anti-Semitism is, and that they know best, better than people who are experiencing anti-Semitism in this country. And that's my point.
questions. I think if you've read the article, apparently the police is the biggest receiver of anti-Semitism in Germany. Is there anything else that you want to maybe mention? Or maybe, Phil, do you want to give some comments about the things that were said?
I can make a... Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just a couple of quick comments. I bow to your wisdom about... I didn't think that it was the German state that supported the PLO, but certainly the German left. And if you watch a film like the Baader-Meinhof complex, you have the German left going over to Palestine to train in the PFLP training camps. It's always quite an irony when Germany leftists celebrate the banning of an organisation like Sami Doon when this is the exact people who they were training with a generation or two before. But something did happen, or a couple of things happened. I think one was that the fall of the wall, and there was a genuine fear amongst a lot of leftists that, particularly after there was a number of pogroms and attacks on asylum homes in places like Sillingen and Mölln, both east and west, there was a genuine fear that a greater Germany would lead to a rise of the Nazis. And the old German left had kind of fallen apart by then. The 68 movement, which had given birth to the RAF, the Red Army faction, had really not in any good sense. And so, after the fall of the wall, there was a concerted campaign from above to try and shift the narrative, to say we don't, we would like to maintain German interests in the oil region. We don't want have a strong left supporting that, and so working hand in hand with some leftists who should know better, there was a concerted campaign along the lines of what I was talking about. So it's not an accident. We are the victims of a propaganda campaign, which means we need to make our own propaganda and better. Just something I've written for myself that I was thinking, which I was wanting to bring up earlier and I didn't. There's often a theory that what this is all about, what German guilt is all about, is Germans making it all about themselves. There is a lovely dialectical German word, Jein, yes and no. Yes, to an extent there is. It is the privilege of living in a country where you don't get bombed every day, to be able to have these abstruse arguments about about anti-Semitism rather than the bombing of schools and things. But I really think that most Germans really are conflicted on this. It's not that they are arrogant people who cannot think beyond their own front door. It is the sheer intensity of the propaganda campaign on one side and the sheer weakness of our side in being able to counter, historic weakness of our side being able to counter that, means that a lot of white Germans are taking a bad position for good intentions. And if we write them off, if we just say, oh, they're arrogant, they're only concerned about themselves, I think we miss the fact that we've seen it on the health workers' rallies. There's been rallies outside the Charité where German health workers have got up and said the bombing of hospitals in Gaza is an attack on our conditions, our hospitals in Germany as well. Or to say that the money which is being thrown into the war in Gaza is one of the main reasons why we don't get a €29 travel ticket anymore. The money isn't there because the money is over there. And so I think while it's right to point to some self-indulgence particularly amongst media commentators, I think we should. I did an interview with Dylan Papa, I think last year, and his main quote was, "Don't give up on the Germans," and I think we shouldn't give up on the Germans, and we should engage in sincere discussion about trying to convince people and not think that they are necessarily going to remain narrow-minded.
I'm just going to...
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, this really follows on from what Phil just said, I think. That there is a danger if we say that Germany is a special case and that there is something particular about German history which means that it's impossible to have solidarity for Palestine in a way which we've seen that across the rest of the world. There's a big danger in that. I think clearly there are special circumstances, but I don't think it's inevitable that the Palestine solidarity in Germany is in such a weak state compared to other countries. I think the starting point has to be that the German awareness of what happened in the Holocaust is actually a good thing. I would wish that people in England were as aware of the history of the Holocaust as people in Germany are. The question of the conclusions that we draw from that and how it's told and so on, that's something else. But the starting point is surely a good one, that people are opposed to what happened in the Holocaust. I think it's a question of where the blame lies. And I think we have to say that the blame lies not with the Germans, but with the German political class. I think if you look at the fact that for the last 3 years we've had the SPD and the Greens in power, sending weapons to Israel, defending everything that Israel has done, that disempowers the base of those two parties. It's very difficult for left-wing Greens, left-wing Social Democrats, if there are that many left, it makes it very difficult for them to criticise their own government. Yeah, I'm sure if the CDU had been in power here, actually there would have been a lot more protest against what's going on in Gaza. Just want to briefly talk about my experience at the NGO demo. I think it was the 17th, 18th of October at the Hauptbahnhof with you. It was very interesting the way that as soon as the NGOs called an action, it's much too late, but they've done it. This is a great first step. It provided a shield, it provided cover for a whole lot of people that we haven't seen before on the Palestine demos, to come and voice their opposition to what's going on in Gaza. Yeah? So the NGOs have taken the role that you would expect the left-wing Greens and SPD usually to do. So it was a great step forward. I was very uncertain when it's organised by people like Pax Christi and Paul Webb, you don't expect a lot of good politics necessarily, but the people who came were a lot further than the people giving the speeches. And I think that's where the potential lies. Yeah? It's not the case that we're condemned, because we're in Germany, to put up with inevitable problems with Palestine solidarity. The potential is there. We've just got to find ways to use it.
Person here. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for the talk and for organizing this festival. It's very needed. And I guess the question that I have, I'm not really that familiar with the whole phenomenon of anti-literature, but I feel like there are a lot of anti-literature sitting in the editorial rooms of the media in this country. Maybe that's not actual anti-literature, but the thing is, though, is that I feel like the media here is really complicit in genocide, more so than even media in the US, where I'm from. And even before October 7th, 2 years ago during the documenta, it became very clear to me that Germany lacks a strong fact-checking culture in their editorial rooms. And I'm consistently amazed whenever I turn on Tagesschau or actually look at a mainstream German media source. I mean, I'm not amazed, I'm frustrated and disgusted, really, because I'm getting my news from other places, and I guess my question is, what do we do? Is there any recourse? I mean, how does one, I mean, certainly in the political sphere, you can talk to people who are involved in parties or become involved in a party, but with media, I feel like there's some fantastic journalists out there, I have to say, and I'm extremely grateful to them. But there are some real bad actors who are basically just shills for Zionism and really doing nasty work. So I guess my question is, what do we do?
Do you want to answer the question?
If there's some more, I can wait.
If there are any other questions that someone wants to ask, we can do them all at once, or we can start with this one, and then if anything comes up. There, yep, there.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on actually making a comment, but I thought your comment was very pertinent in that. As an Arab living here for the last few years, I remember before I came here, I had Arab friends, and they would complain about kind of left we saw from Israel and so on. And I was kind of like, often I would take it kind of lightly, that's certain what you expect, right? Like, if anyone's going to be, any words coming, that's going to happen, it's going to be German. But then when I came here, it infuriated me in a way that I didn't expect, because it's the level of shamelessness and lack of humility which really strikes me. Like even in countries like the US and the UK, for instance, you mentioned the point about the media, it's a varied spectrum. There's much more critical voices and so on. And what you said about fact checking, it's like I've been involved in certain movements here, and journalists, like, they don't do the basics of the profession, which is, if we take quotes from both sides, you verify what something has been said. Even the most basics, they're not doing it here. And yet it's also one spectrum completely. There's no variation of opinion. And in many ways, I think, also when it comes to the police, like I saw this in how police deal with demonstrators and so on. They're so aggressive. And they're aggressive even without provocation. And that's what I've noticed, like, maybe I have a certain white passing privilege, but in the UK, where I also used to live, it wasn't like that, like there are many problems as well, but kind of you can have a bit of a conversation before they screw you over. Here there's no conversation, they straight away go for the violence, straight away. And in many ways it strikes me as, sorry, I'm not going to ramble too much on, but for instance the idea of, maybe a lot of you have seen it, the parade in Cologne where they put that image of the Palestinian with an anti-Semitic nose. Like with a long nose and showing this Palestinian as an evil character and so on. It's like, well, this is almost like something out of South Park. The lack of subtlety and so on is just insane. And it really drives me crazy in a way. So, and just to finish with this, I feel like actually, well, in a lot of ways, Germany is actually acting a bit like what we would typically describe as a third world state, but they have this idea that they're, like, the best thing ever. So I don't know to what extent I've been thinking about this, to what extent you can put this down to whether we should engage in the conversation about culture, if it is linked to any aspects of certain cultural dispositions that might exist somewhere, or psychology or so on, but maybe that's also exaggerated, because as we've seen in polls, like majority of Germans seem to have a good position, but then why do these crazy pathologies exist in Germany in a way that they don't seem to elsewhere?
I think that was a great ramble, actually, so thank you for saying that. Is there anything? No? We'll just go straight to
Okay.
Yep.
I'm trying to avoid speaking too much, but give me a chance and I will. I just want to talk about three things. Fairly quickly about the anti-Deutsche, then about to what extent Germany is different, and finally about what we can do. And then we've got time for another round, we can find it. Okay. About the anti-Deutsche, I have for a long time been arguing that there's a bit of an obsession, particularly from the non-German left, about the anti-Deutsche, which attributes more power to them than they actually have, and certainly more weight than they actually have. I think one of the reasons in which they seem to have so much most influence is that in a situation where nobody is saying anything, you only need a few people to start shouting, and everybody hears them. And I think the sort of people read these crazy things which are written, which are said by the anti-Deutsche, sees nobody challenging them, because of course Germans can't talk about Palestine, and attributing to them more power than they have. Having said that, I think we need to be clear, there's a difference between the anti-Deutsche and ruling class interests. The anti-Deutsche don't run the Tagesspiegel, but the Tagesspiegel report of, actually the Tagesspiegel report of the closure of Oyoun was sickening. The Tagesspiegel report of Palestine is sickening. This is not a strange, weird letters or pseudo left-wing cult of the anti-Deutsche. This is because it is in the interest of the German political class, it's in the interest in German media to support German imperial interests in the Middle East, which means supporting Israel at the expense of Palestinians. I think this is something quite different to the anti-Deutsche. And moving on to the second point, this is something which is not particularly specific to Germany. If you think in Britain about the vile campaign against Jeremy Corbyn, which was carried out not just by the right wing, not just by the media, but by half his own party, including the people who are currently in charge of Britain. If you think in the USA of the constant allegations that Bernie Sanders was another self-hating Jew, another anti-Semite, or if you look most recently about the way in which the Dutch media reported a riot, a Zionist riot in Amsterdam a week or two ago, as being a pogrom, as being an attack. Yeah, Yitzke will tell me afterwards, Amsterdam has never had pogroms. Certainly there is no reported instance of anything other than what went on in Amsterdam was violent hooligans, most of whom have been in the Israeli army, most of whom voted for fascism, so many of them voted for fascism, running riot in the street. And then you look at the world media, but particularly the Dutch media, of blaming the largely Moroccan taxi drivers and other inhabitants of Afghanistan. And so this attempt to marginalise Palestinians and support this attempt to push support for Israel is a constant worldwide. It's not something which is specific to Germany. The difference is that, for reasons I've tried to go into and need more time to go into in full, in Germany we do not have the mass movement for Palestine that they had that they have in other countries, which means the vile attacks on Corbyn did happen, but there was strong resistance against it. The attacks on Sanders did happen, but you look at the way in which the campus protests sprung up in the USA this year. The attacks in Amsterdam did happen. The Amsterdam mayor retracted all her attacks yesterday. I couldn't. We were talking about this. It was yesterday, day before yesterday. This must be. Someone must have made this up. But the strength of the movement, the pro-Palestine movement in the Netherlands, meant that their side, who were trying to push through pro-Israel, anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim propaganda, have had to backtrack. And where we need to get to. We need to get to a situation where the same as in Germany, where they don't feel confident to put through an anti-Semitism resolution. They don't, and the mass deportations. I mean, if they get their way. And every party from the Greens and the SPD up to the AFD are talking about mass deportations, they will be deporting a lot of Palestinians and a lot of people from global South countries who support Palestine. And so, whether or not we build a movement which is able to resist that, it's really a matter of life and death for some people. So again, that's all the bad stuff. Let's finish on the good stuff. I was another interview. I did quite a few interviews for leftberlin.com. You really should subscribe to our newsletter. I did one with Nadia Samor, a Palestinian lawyer, and she said, I interview Nadia often, and it's become a joke now, that the final question is always, what do we do? And Nadia's answer is always, get organised. And it's partly a joke because it's right, because we're not going to beat them on our own. We do need to join organisations. I'd say that there are a number of organisations downstairs with stalls, 3 of whom I'm an active member of, the Gaza Committee, the Left Berlin and Socialist-cultural. But as Nadia said, find the organisation that fits what you want to do, join it, build it, and do things. And don't just sit around talking to yourself. Go out and do things. This is why I think the initiative that the Gaza Committee is making to have stalls in the middle of Neukölln, hopefully soon in the middle of Wedding and other places, talking to people, changing people's mind, building a movement. That's the way we're going to counter. It is a real fact that Germany is different to other countries, but that is not inevitable. But how long we stay in the current situation depends on what each and every one of us does individually, but much more so of what we do collectively.
Thank you. Phil didn't mention this, but I'm actually from Austria. That's why we talked about this. Yeah, great. Not a city you want to fuck around and find out. Does anyone have any comments? Right there. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, I'm glad the way that you phrased the talk. I was definitely ready to give up on Germans, so I'm glad to have a little bit more energy. But I think one thing, we can't talk about German guilt in this circumstances without talking about German racism and like calling it out. As an Arab living in Berlin, having these conversations to kind of have the conversation like, I'm not barbaric, I swear, listen to my accent, like passing is fine, is a whole other load. So I think it's really quick comment is those two conversations are inseparable, and let's just kind of keep that at the forefront. And if you're not Arab yourself, I think you do bear a greater responsibility to go out there and convince people, because it bears really heavy when you are Arab. But yeah, it's not always just German guilt, and that it is complicated. It's that it's easy to hate Arabs from their point of view. I needed to outline that.
It's a great thing to have this conversation. Thank you very much. Anyone else wants to comment, question? Right here in the front.
I initially didn't want to say comment too much, but after this comment, I feel inclined to share my experiences with how I handle Deutsche journalists. I'm a freelance journalist, so I don't write for any of the media that I've come to despise. But what I've noticed is the tactics that kind of work with people like Deutsche is the tactics that we all learned in 2020 when we have to engage with COVID deniers. So one of the things that I, as a journalist, a lot of times do is to keep a straight face when someone tells me blatant lies and disinformation and racism, and then to say, interesting, how did you arrive at that conclusion? And could you show me where you've gotten this information? What sort of sources do you use? Where do you keep yourself informed? This is what I use. Do you mind engaging with that a little bit? I would love to understand how you come to that conclusion. That's one of the things, and also another thing is I've had a lot of encounters, really uncomfortable encounters with people who have a lot of power in media in Germany, and I noticed that that if you kind of talk to them about their independence, as in like, I value you for your independent thinking. I value you because you've done this and this. It's the Tonmarking Musik in Germany.
That's what it is. It's manners and how we say things here. That's unfortunately that's what liberalism has brainwashed into our heads. And so, if you still have a little bit of energy, that takes a lot of energy to do. But if you still have a lot of energy, maybe those are constructive ways to deal with people who are just really assholes.
All right, we're getting to the last part, really. So before I hand it over to Phil for closing remarks, is there anyone else who wants to mention anything or no? Well, thank you very much, everyone, for engaging today and for the many amazing comments and questions that we got from the audience. I'll now hand it over to Phil for closing remarks, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference and many festivals, and many other talks that they're very cool, so please check them out.
So that was only a couple of things, I'll probably be short. Firstly, thank you for saying we need to take on racism. What I've been trying to argue is we can win these arguments. They're over. I say, don't give up on the Germans. We can win them. That's not the same as saying we've won them. We've won them already. And there is a way of doing politics which is let's listen to what people have to say and adapt to that. Is the policy adopted by Kamala Harris and didn't do her very well. It's also a policy adopted by a lot of the German left from the SPD and the Greens, whose answer to the AfD proposing mass deportations is, okay, we'll make mass deportation as well. To even Die Linke, which when a racist anti-Semitism resolution comes says, well, we can't vote for it, so we can't vote against it, so we'll abstain. Now, we need a politics which doesn't abstain. We need to actively engage, and this doesn't just mean engaging for Palestinians. It means really taking up racism, and particularly taking up racism if it comes up on our side, because we need to build the unity which wins, and the unity which wins is that we need a movement which isn't just contain people from the global south, people of colour, but is led by people of south, people that go. So, and we're able to get that, we will need to take on certain amounts of racism within our own movement. It's not all racism. Some of it is just people are used to things working in one way and cannot envisage that it could be any different. There are people who think the German anti-fascist movement has got to be led by a white German because who else has got an interest in fighting fascism? Well, to be honest, quite a lot of people, and these are the people who should be leading a revived movement. Just the last thing perhaps about the media. There is two things are happening at the moment. One is that the economic crisis that started in 2008 is getting deeper, and people are absolutely at loss to explain what is going on. People are being hit hard in their pockets. People who used to work for Volkswagen now don't have a job. People who are used to paying affordable rents are now paying more. The day-to-day situation of a lot of people is getting worse, and none of the established parties are able to offer any secure answers. The other thing is people are becoming more and more aware that the media lie. That more and more people are seeing media reports which go directly against their personal explanation, which on the one side leads to the growth in fake news. Well, if I can't trust what the Tagesspiegel writes, then maybe this person who writes on the internet and maybe they're just as valid. But also, growth of social media gives us more opportunity to intervene. We don't own the big presses, we don't own the Tagesspiegel, we don't own the Bild Zeitung, and so there is a possibility for our side to intervene if we get our act together. I know Palestinians who are COVID deniers, and they are COVID deniers precisely on the reason, look, we have seen how every day, every year, the media print lies about Palestine. then doesn't it make sense that they're printing lies about COVID as well, if they're clamping down on demonstrations and things like that? This means we need our own media. We need to get people with arguing alternatives. The right wing until now have been better at this than we are. The right wing on TikTok. The right wing, the support of amongst young people for groups like the AfD, but neo-Nazi groups in the USA is shockingly high at the moment, which means that part of our resistance has got to be building the demonstrations, part of our resistance has got to be standing on street corners, collecting signatures, talking to people, but we also really need to get our act together and improve our media as well. And so when I repeat Nadia's thing, we need to organise. One of the parts of us organises, and we need our own publications which are there to counter the lies, on the one hand from the mainstream media, but on the other hand from the right-wing bloggers who are finding an audience who are losing their trust in the system and can either go left or right. And if we're not there for them, then they will go to the right and things will get even worse.
Taking it a little bit over, but I think we're all set. So thank you everyone for joining, and I hope to see you at the rest of the festival. Thank you.